My name is Elizabeth, and I was born and raised in Fairfield County, Connecticut. Growing up, my dad Richard was the center of my world. He owned a small but successful construction company and worked hard to give our family everything we needed. He taught me how to change a tire before I could even drive, showed me how to stand up for myself, and always told me I was just as capable as any man. He used to say, "You're my right hand, Lizzie." But when I tell you that everything changed after he passed, I mean it in the most soul-crushing way. My mother died when I was 13, so for most of my life it was just Dad and me. I didn't grow up with siblings, but when I was in college, Dad reconnected with an old flame and married her shortly after. Her name was Lorraine, and she brought with her a son, Tyler. He was 2 years younger than me and had that cocky, know-it-all attitude from the start. But I didn't push back. I figured, okay, this is family now. Let's make it work. At first, things were tolerable. Dad still made time for me, still called me his business partner when I'd help him with spreadsheets or employee issues. But after a few years, something started to shift. He got quieter around me and more protective of Lorraine and Tyler. Tyler, who barely knew the first thing about construction, suddenly had a desk in my dad's office and started shadowing job sites like he owned the place. I'll never forget the day Dad first hinted at preparing for the future. He said, "Tyler's young, but he's learning. I need someone to keep the business running when I'm gone." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking. I'd worked alongside him since I was 16. 12-hour days, dusty blueprints, budget meetings, client dinners. Tyler had barely shown up until 6 months ago. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself, he's just trying to be fair. He's still grieving in his own way. Maybe I'm overreacting. But deep down, I could feel something slipping. A growing distance between me and the man who used to call me his right hand. When Dad passed unexpectedly from a stroke last fall, I was devastated. He was only 64. We hadn't even had our usual Sunday brunch that week. One minute he was texting me about plans for Thanksgiving, and the next I was sitting in a lawyer's office with Lorraine and Tyler, listening to a will that made my heart stop cold. And that's when the real betrayal began. The lawyer opened the manila envelope with a kind of cold finality, like it was just another Tuesday. But to me, it felt like the moment my world was about to split in two. I sat in that sterile office across from Lorraine and Tyler, clutching the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white. The will was read aloud. My father left the house. To Lorraine. The company, to Tyler. His savings, his investments, his car, even his damn tools. All to them. And me? I was given a photo album. A leather-bound photo album, labeled, "To My Lizzie. So you remember." That was it. Not a share of the company I helped him build. Not a single cent from the business account I'd spent nights balancing. Nothing of value, nothing with power, nothing with weight. I couldn't breathe. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to process what had just happened. Lorraine had this look on her face, almost smug, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Tyler didn't even make eye contact. He just shifted in his seat, like he couldn't wait to get out of there and start putting his name on the office door. The lawyer said something about Dad's wishes and final decisions. I barely heard him. The words were muffled by a rising roar in my ears. The sound of everything I'd worked for, believed in, falling apart. I drove home and opened the album with shaking hands. Inside were photos of me and Dad over the years. Me in a hard hat at 12, helping him paint the office walls. Him braiding my hair when I had the flu. Handwritten notes in the margins like, "First client pitch, she nailed it," or "Liz fixed the payroll bug." It was love. I could see it in every picture, every scribbled sentence. So then, why? Why would he cut me out like this? I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the closed album, going over every conversation, every birthday, every quiet Sunday afternoon we spent together. Something didn't add up. My father wasn't perfect, but he wasn't cruel. And this was cruel. By morning, my grief had turned into something sharper, suspicion. And for the first time, I said it out loud. Something's not right. This doesn't feel like my dad's voice. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't let it go. Something in my gut told me that this wasn't right. I'd grown up hearing my dad talk about fairness, about legacy, about how one day I'd take over the company because I understood how to build something that lasts. Now suddenly I was cut out completely, left with nothing but memories and a few scribbled notes in a photo album. It didn't make sense. I started digging. I requested a certified copy of the will from the lawyer's office. The first thing I noticed, the date. It had been signed just 3 weeks before my father passed away. That was during a period when he'd been in and out of the hospital for blood pressure issues. He hadn't even mentioned updating the will. Then I looked at the signature. It was shaky, slanted. Not the way he usually signed his name. Not the sharp, confident R I'd watched him use to sign contracts for decades. I pulled out an old client agreement from 6 months prior and laid it next to the will. The difference was obvious, but I needed more than a gut feeling. So, I called his nurse from that time, Cheryl. She was kind, and when I asked about the week Dad supposedly signed the new will, her voice hesitated. He wasn't himself then, she said carefully, mostly sedated. Lorraine handled everything. I knew it. This wasn't just a case of being forgotten or overlooked. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I reached out to a friend of mine from college, Naomi, who's now a paralegal. I showed her the documents and she immediately flagged a few things. The witnesses to the will were both Lorraine's friends. One of them had even posted on Facebook the week before saying, "So excited for Tyler's big promotion coming soon." What promotion? My dad hadn't even passed away yet. Everything started to unravel. But here's the thing. When I told Lorraine I was questioning the will, she didn't deny it. She smirked and said, "Let it go, Elizabeth. Your father made his choice. Don't embarrass yourself." That was the final straw. Embarrass myself? No. I was about to embarrass her, because if they thought I was just going to take this lying down, they didn't know me at all. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I was going to take this public. I didn't go to the press right away. I wasn't looking for attention. I was looking for justice. But the moment Lorraine told me not to embarrass myself, something clicked. I realized they were counting on me to stay quiet, to keep this betrayal behind closed doors. That's how they'd win. By making me feel ashamed for speaking up. So I flipped the script. I started by writing a post on my personal Facebook. I didn't name names, but I laid out the truth. That my father's will had been changed just weeks before his death while he was medicated. That I had concerns about the validity of that document, and that I was pursuing legal advice. I included a few photos from the album Dad left me, photos of us working side by side, proof of my role in the business, of our bond. I ended the post with, "Silence is how people get away with things. I won't be silent anymore." I didn't expect the response I got. Hundreds of comments poured in. Former employees of my father's company, old friends of his, neighbors, clients. People I hadn't talked to in years. They all said the same thing. "This doesn't sound like Richard." Some even messaged privately to tell me things they'd seen, how Tyler had started calling himself the heir before Dad even passed, how Lorraine had been weirdly involved in business meetings lately. I compiled every message, every screenshot, every email. And then I went further. I set up a separate Instagram account to share the timeline of what happened. I posted side-by-side comparisons of Dad's signature. I shared a video of me walking through the office I used to help design, now stripped of every trace of me. I included clips of former staff members sharing what they remembered. It wasn't revenge. It was a record, a public archive, a digital wall that said, you don't get to rewrite history just because someone can't speak for themselves anymore. Within days, local blogs picked it up, then a small online news outlet. The story headline read, "Daughter of local businessman challenges will, claims stepmother manipulated final wishes." That's when Lorraine called me. She wasn't smug anymore. She was furious. "You're dragging the family name through the mud," she hissed into the phone. "You're making us look bad." I took a breath and said, "No. You did that. I'm just making sure people see it." She hung up. And for the first time since the reading of the will, I felt powerful. Once the local news picked up the story, things escalated fast. I got a call from a woman named Meredith, who used to be my father's accountant. She hadn't seen him in almost a year because, apparently, Lorraine had taken over financial matters. Meredith told me there had been some unusual activity in the business accounts shortly before Dad passed. Withdrawals, asset transfers, things that didn't match his usual patterns. She offered to help me sort through the paper trail. That same day, Naomi, the paralegal friend I mentioned earlier, introduced me to a probate attorney named Gwen Landry. Gwen was sharp, calm, and honest. When I laid everything out for her, the timing of the will, the shaky signature, the witnesses, the comments from the nurse, she didn't hesitate. "This isn't just suspicious, Elizabeth. This could be grounds for a full challenge in probate court." So I filed. I challenged the will, officially, publicly. And let me tell you, once legal papers were filed, Lorraine and Tyler dropped the mask real quick. They suddenly became the picture-perfect grieving family. Their lawyer released a statement to the local press saying I was misguided, emotional, and seeking attention. Lorraine even claimed she had taken Elizabeth in like her own daughter and that I was distorting facts out of grief. It was disgusting, but I had receipts. Gwen helped me gather everything: the nurse's statement, the financial discrepancies, the witness connection to Lorraine, an expert analysis comparing my dad's known signatures with the one on the will. I even had a handwriting specialist review it. The results came back. High probability of inconsistency. Meanwhile, people were still reaching out to me. A former foreman from the company messaged me and said, "Your dad always said you were the one meant to carry the torch. He wouldn't have done this to you." That meant everything. What shocked me most, though, was the support from women I didn't even know. Strangers who found my story on Instagram or through blog shares. Some had gone through similar things. Step-relatives manipulating estates, family members being cut out after a death. They said my story gave them courage. Some even showed up at the first hearing, sat in the back row just to show support. Lorraine and Tyler, on the other hand, showed up with a team of lawyers and smug looks they couldn't quite hide. I stared straight ahead. I wasn't scared anymore, because I knew something they didn't. I had truth on my side, and the fight had only just begun. Court wasn't like in the movies. There were no gasps from the gallery, no slamming gavels, but the tension? You could cut it with a knife. The first few hearings were mostly procedural. Motions, document submissions, all that legal choreography I had to learn quickly. Gwen, my attorney, was my anchor. She told me exactly what to expect, and she was always 2 steps ahead of Lorraine's legal team. Then came the day we submitted the handwriting expert's report. I watched Lorraine's face as Gwen calmly explained how the signature on the will showed signs of being forged or written under physical impairment. The judge raised an eyebrow. Tyler shifted in his seat. They weren't smug anymore. But the twist that truly rocked the case? It came from someone I never expected to hear from again. Cheryl, the nurse who took care of my dad during his last weeks, reached out again. This time, she said there was something else she hadn't told me earlier. She had kept a journal during her shifts, mostly as a way to protect herself legally when patients had complex family situations. In it, she had recorded that Lorraine had repeatedly pressured my father to make things official before he got too weak. Even more shocking, Cheryl noted that on the day the will was allegedly signed, Dad was heavily sedated and barely responsive. There was no way he could have fully understood what he was doing, let alone signed a legally binding document. That journal was gold. We entered it into evidence. Lorraine's lawyer tried to argue it was hearsay, but the judge allowed it for context, especially since Cheryl was willing to testify. Meanwhile, Gwen uncovered something else. Emails. Naomi helped trace archived emails between Lorraine and the attorney who drafted the new will. The messages suggested Lorraine had orchestrated the entire thing. In one, she wrote, "We need this done ASAP. Richard isn't thinking clearly and Tyler needs security for the business." That email hit like a bomb. The judge called for a longer hearing. Lorraine looked pale. Tyler looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. But me? I sat there with my back straight and my heart pounding. Not from fear anymore, but from something else. Vindication. I wasn't done yet, but I knew this was the beginning of the end. For their lies, for the fake narrative they'd tried to spin, for the version of events where I'd disappeared quietly into the background. I was very much here, and I was about to make sure the truth had the last word. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and I barely slept the night before. I kept replaying everything. Dad's voice, the look on Lorraine's face when she realized I wasn't backing down, the sheer weight of what had been stolen from me. From him. The courtroom was quiet that day. More people had shown up. Some were reporters, others familiar faces from town. I spotted two of Dad's old clients in the back row, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. I wasn't sure if they were there for me or just to witness the storm about to unfold. But either way, I was ready. Gwen began by calling Cheryl to the stand. She was calm, professional, and heartbreakingly sincere. She talked about my father's last days, how gentle and kind he'd been, even when in pain. Then she read directly from her journal. He was not coherent. I asked if he wanted to sign anything that day, and he didn't respond. Lorraine was frustrated. She made a comment to the effect of, "We don't have time to wait for him to wake up." There was a long silence after that. Then came the bombshell. Gwen introduced the email chain between Lorraine and the attorney. The judge read it silently, then looked up and asked the opposing counsel if they'd like to respond. They had nothing. Lorraine's lawyer tried to discredit the emails, said they were misinterpreted. But it was weak. Everyone could see that now. The mask was slipping and there was no saving face. And then Gwen did something that silenced the entire courtroom. She called me to the stand. I hadn't planned to testify. I thought the evidence would be enough. But Gwen said this was my chance, and once I was sworn in, once I sat there facing Lorraine and Tyler, I realized she was right. I told them everything, not just about the business, but about my father, our Sunday brunches, the time he cried when I got into college, how he taught me to read blueprints before I learned to drive, how he said, "This company is yours, Lizzie. One day, it's all going to be yours." I paused, and then I looked at Lorraine and said, "You took advantage of a man who trusted you. You tried to erase me from his legacy. But I am his legacy." The courtroom was silent. Even Tyler, who'd looked smug and invincible just weeks before, couldn't lift his eyes. Lorraine's face was stone, but there was a flicker in her expression I hadn't seen before. When I stepped down from the witness box, I knew it was over. And the judge, he looked directly at Lorraine and said, "I'm strongly considering invalidating this will in full." My breath caught, but I didn't celebrate yet, because there was still one more part to come. the judge's final ruling. 2 weeks after that final hearing, I got the call. I was sitting on the back porch of my father's old house, now technically Lorraine's, watching the autumn leaves fall across the lawn he used to rake every Saturday morning. I had driven by out of habit, unsure if I'd ever truly let this place go. The phone rang. It was Gwen. "The judge has ruled in your favor," she said. I didn't say anything at first. My body went still, my breath caught in my throat. Then she continued, her voice steady. "The will has been deemed invalid. The estate will revert to your father's previous legally recognized will from 5 years ago. The business, the house, the assets, everything is coming back to you, Elizabeth." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall, not out of greed, not even victory, but out of sheer relief. Because I had fought. I had refused to be silenced, and it had mattered. A few days later, I returned to the office, my father's office. It had been untouched since Lorraine and Tyler vacated, per court order. Dust covered the desk. A few of Tyler's things still sat in the corner, including a mug that said "Boss Man." I tossed it in the trash. I placed my father's photo on the desk, then the album, the one he'd left me. I flipped to the last page. It read, "I believe in you. You've always known what matters most." Now I understood. That album wasn't a consolation prize. It was his reminder. His message hidden in plain sight that he still saw me. Even if he didn't have the strength to stop what was happening, he trusted I would. And I did. The company was in bad shape, financially gutted by Lorraine and Tyler during their short reign. But I wasn't scared. I'd helped build it once. I could rebuild it again. This time, in my name. I renovated the space, hired back the old crew, rebranded the company with a new name, R.L. and Daughter. Some people told me I was brave. Some said I was foolish for airing the dirty laundry publicly. But the truth? Silence would have broken me, speaking up saved me. And if you're watching this, wondering whether to fight back, even when it feels like no one believes you, let me be the voice you need. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to protect what's yours. You are allowed to be loud. Because sometimes the only way to honor the ones we love is to make sure no one gets to rewrite their story but us.